There are not many things that are more intertwined with banking than bookkeeping, accounting, and taxes. By now, almost every software provider in this space allows users to integrate their existing bank accounts through an open banking integration. But more and more of these providers are now launching also their own banking products. And one of them is Accountable. Accountable is a Belgian startup that targets freelancers in Belgium and Germany. Earlier this year, Accountable launched an embedded banking offering consisting of an account and card solution for freelancers in Germany. In this episode, I speak with Tino Keller, one of the 3 co-founders of Accountable. We take a deep dive into Accountable's product offering. We discuss how banks drove them into launching their own banking product. And Tino shares how much money they're making with their embedded finance offering. My name is Lars Markull, and this is the Embedded Finance Review podcast. Every 2 weeks, I interview the builders and shapers of embedded finance. Let's dive in. Hi, Tino. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today, and in what part of the world are you located right now?
Thanks, Lars. Thanks for inviting me. And yeah, I'm in Berlin right now and happy to see a bit of the summer coming up slowly.
Yeah, I just want to say it was pretty dark over here. Even I'm in Berlin as well, but now the sun is actually coming out, so maybe it's the right time now. We met a few times in the last couple of weeks. Obviously, you were also at our very own Embedded Finance Review event in April, where we spoke about Accountable and the banking launch. We met last night at another event shortly as well. Actually, a lot of stuff has happened on your side in the last months, I would say, and that's basically where we want to dive a little bit deeper from understanding Accountable a little better. Obviously, the launch of your very own banking product. And then your startup has been acquired as well. It's also not a small news, as we're trying to put everything together. But before diving into the different areas, maybe let's start with giving a little bit of intro pitch to Accountable. And I think the most interesting maybe for the listeners is like, why does Accountable exist? Like when you started Accountable back in the days, what was like big problem that you saw in the market that you wanted to solve?
Our objective, our mission is, and that's what we started out with, is to solve taxes for the self-employed so they can get in control of their finances, have a clear visibility on what of the money that hits their bank account from their hard work is theirs and how much they owe to the tax office. And we do this as simple as humanly possible. They can scan receipts, write invoices, and then automatically the bookkeeping happens under the hood. And out of this, they can produce all tax declarations necessary from their VAT to their personal income tax. And as you said, we've added accountable banking as a bank account where you can set aside money for taxes. We launched actually in mid-February. And we feel this is part of our journey to move from our claim, all your taxes done, to all your finances done right.
Makes sense. And before diving a lot deeper into the banking stack, maybe can you give us a few more numbers or metrics in terms of like the size of Accountable? Like how long have you been around? What markets are you addressing? How many users do you have, if you report any of this?
We've been around for some time now. I think still a startup technically, but we're active in Belgium and in Germany. We've launched our MVP in Germany beginning of 2020 and developed from there to now 40,000 users, 26,000 paying customers. So we have a freemium solution and companies about now at 70 people. I think end of the year, we're probably going to be around 100. So a good size, a lot of happy clients, a lot of feedback. We use that to develop the product further.
Great. I mean, I think we're quite good to understand for like dive a little bit deeper that Accountable is not just like, let's say a startup has been around for a couple of months, but you've like built a great customer base and probably have learned a lot as well, because at the end of it, I guess there are not so many topics out there that are like so connected to financial services and bookkeeping, accounting, and taxes, and especially Accountable. And I guess this is also applicable to other service providers, maybe also addressing like SMEs, completely different type of businesses. Open banking was the go-to method very often for connecting these two worlds. And I think that's also something with Accountable that you launched before your very own banking product. Maybe you can talk a little bit about like how you started with open banking and why now adding your very own banking product if you're already connecting with existing bank accounts.
Yeah, very good point. Actually, like the PSD2 regulation and open banking was like the starting point for Accountable to say, hey, now that you can actually connect to a bank account and consolidate transactions, invoices, expenses, and have a clear view on your bookkeeping, there's a time to build a new type of solution that takes away the pain of finding a tax advisor. You can do it, but you not necessarily have to. So yeah, we started with open banking, integrating all banks in Belgium, all banks in Germany. But there's a realization that open banking works and depends a bit on how the bank implements it. Sometimes it's really smooth, it's nice, it's just really like plug and play. And sometimes it's a bit more difficult. Yeah, you're messy. You have to like log into like your open banking accounts provider, create an account and at a place where you don't even know the brand, then at your own bank again. And then the connection is disconnected every 90 days and people come back, why can't I see my transactions? New users say, hey, I want the transaction of the last 2 years, which also is not easily done. So there are a couple of details that make it less smooth than we would like it to be. But we've been building a good business and a good service on top of it. So we're quite thankful, yeah.
But then when you say, in a way, like PSD2, the directive that kind of like launched into like the whole open banking effort in Europe, the European Union, when you say like the PSD2 was your starting point for accountable, that sounds like a little bit like you never really envisioned like offering your own banking product. Was there like a specific time when you kind of realized, okay, we probably should do that? And what is that, like very recently? Or was it already some time ago where you realized we should probably own this piece and not purely rely on open banking?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's always the question, like, what is an MVP that works? I think in the early days in Germany, our MVP was not strong enough. We just had expenses and invoicing and not really the tech side, and only started to see real traction when we were delivering end-to-end also the tech side. And banking then is a whole new story. And if I look back like 5 years ago, the options to implement your own bank account was a lot harder and a lot more expensive. So we started looking at this a couple of years ago. First approach also by one of the big credit card companies who were looking at the space. But in the end, you're a startup, you have to focus on delivering the core service to your users they get value from. And then you also have to see what you do with the money you get from investors. And the business case has to make sense. And we've looked at this again and again. And at the time, we didn't feel it was the right move, even though we saw that there could be a better product, something that works for users. Now we've come to a point where we as a company feel we were ready to build the right product. We felt the market was ready to supply the nuts and bolts and the pipes to make it work. And here we are. And we also see the user adoption that we were hoping for. So it feels like it's the right time to really offer like the solution all in one place. And I think that's where this market is going.
What you're describing like sounds to me like, I mean, like to put in different words, like monitoring like your own situation, monitoring the available players in the market, looking at customers, their feedback, and maybe very early there was already maybe the interest or the desire to launch your own banking product, but obviously you have not enough funding or not enough money to pay for people to do this because other stuff is more important, and maybe the players out there are really expensive as well to set up stuff with them. So obviously all of this has changed now. So today is the time basically, or like where Accountable offers an own banking product, but also offers the open banking integration. How do you see these two ways of managing your finance in Accountable like develop over time? So I guess it will not be the case that you switch off open banking integration like in the next days or weeks or something like this, but do you see both of them working side by side for a very long time? Or is there already from your side maybe a desire now to own more of the banking customers? So make it more compelling for customers to switch from open banking, maybe without forcing them by switching it off, but making it more interesting to switch over to accountable banking.
Yeah, I think you need to earn the right to operate in a certain area. And we've always said, hey, with Accountable, bring your own bank. We're going to make it work for you, right? But then we get this question like, hey, should I get a professional bank account? We say, yes, it's better to separate those finances. You get better results, you get more clarity. And then what's the best business bank account for me? And then if you look at the offerings of business bank accounts, a lot of them are quite expensive. And what they offer is somewhat limited. You know, they try to bolt on some basic invoicing capabilities. But really, if we look at what we do end to end with invoicing and taxes, that's, I guess, more comprehensive. So we would not push people to change a bank account. But what we take away is the pain of choosing a business bank account, because it's not easy and you spend money on something that maybe only delivers incremental value. And if you go into Accountable, you have your invoicing bookkeeping solution, your tax solution, and it comes with a free bank account that actually sets aside money for your taxes directly on a separate account. So I think for a lot of our users, we see that as a good value proposition that works for them. And that's for now all they need.
Makes sense. So in a way, you can also argue, I mean, when again, looking at the whole stack of like accounting, bookkeeping, taxes, and bank account, at the end of it, I mean, this is typical saying, right? The jobs to be done of the users are like the North Star or something we need to focus on. And in a way, you look at new tools, vehicles, how you can do it in a better way than maybe the day before when you had like limited resources and or providers out there.
Exactly. As you said, the job's to be done and what do people need and want. And then there's one way to like plug in things that work well together. But I think we're now in a situation where we can actually offer quite a seamless experience with banking integrated in our solution, which is superior than if you just add another bank account that you might then not even use their interface or app, because you can do everything in accountable. So for a lot of users, it's a good value prop. And that's why we believe in it.
And do you also share like the adoption so far? So you launched, I think you said in February, you launched the product. So you were probably like first like testing a little bit with a couple of users. Can you like share a little bit, like is the product now like available for like the banking features, like available for every user out there? If you have like Belgium and Germany, maybe a little bit more details around the status.
So we started obviously with a better user group to understand how good our product is. And we keep adding requested features as we speak. And we're quite happy with the adoption. So within the first week, we had 300 plus active bank accounts signed up. Then going on, we see like 40% growth continuously, and actually also impacting our revenue growth on each user by 20%. So those are quite good numbers.
Just with the banking features, you were able, like on average, like to increase like 20% of
the ARPA. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that is a nice side effect by offering a new feature, but also seeing, hey, this helps us in marketing, how we can acquire users. And the benchmarks we get from our banking as a service partner, Swan, is that, the way we've launched this and the adoption is quite a success. So they also see different types of adoption cycles. And what we see from our users, it's also very nice. We have like a 95% satisfaction rate of those users on accountable banking. So we've built something that works for those self-employed, and we're quite proud of this. And we continue to invest into the product for sure.
And then you as a co-founder of the business, or maybe from business perspective overall, do you see a change within your company towards these stack? Because you can argue, with open banking and embedded banking, it's quite similar in quotation mark. At the end of it, like the task that the user wants to do is like quite similar. For you as a company, is completely different, right? Earlier, somebody signed up with a bank account, probably signed up before or outside of your services, then connects it. Now it comes from you, right? So I would assume now there's a lot more ownership to all these things, right? Maybe extremely speaking, like earlier, you can always like blame banks, and now obviously you have this ownership of like all of these things. So quite curious to understand, how did you see the organization change in a way towards these features? Like, has there like a substantial shift happened through this launch, or would you say it's marginal?
No, for sure. I think you name it. And to our users, this is accountable banking, right? So we are their bank. Their bank card has the accountable logo on it and our nice mascot, our dog Aldo. So it's clearly us. And we also knew people are then looking at their transactions, looking at their cash balance, and they also do the transactions out of the app. So this has to work. I think we have quite a good satisfaction score with our customer success, our tax coaches, but if it's on banking, we need to like be even faster. So we changed according to the banking requirements. On product, we have a bank squad with a product owner and dedicated resources building their own
I guess
roadmap.
Before that was not was it before with open banking also the case? Or
No, there was a squad called like Bank and Others, and there was also always a lot of other stuff. Like you organize by function, expenses, taxes, invoices, and then the other stuff, which also has some growth and marketing stuff in there. But now we have like a dedicated bank PO, bank resources, and also in customer success, we have a dedicated bank team. So the team there just exclusively works on bank-related customer inquiries. So we really provide the service people expect from a business bank that is responsive and works. We also were able to ship quite fast, actually, feature requests from users. So that also makes me happy and shows that this works, this type of setup.
Interesting. And I think you mentioned like the main driver of going for your own banking was in a way like the dissatisfaction with like how the open banking integration work. And perhaps also, I know from my own open banking experience as well, is like it works well for a lot of people, but then you have like these some users who are like very different experience. And obviously that's something you want to change. You also mentioned now that, or in the previous answer, that you were able to increase the revenue per user. So quite curious to understand, like, were like all these things something you considered? Like, did you already like kind of go for the revenue increase when launching this banking product? Or was it really just about like, we need to be better with the banking integration and we need to own this tech? What was the one core push for you in this direction?
Yeah, I think that the core motivation is about the value for the user. To really see, hey, because if we move into spaces where we don't have a right to operate in, it doesn't make sense. There needs to be some pull and some logical benefit for the user. And we felt this always for us has to be connected to taxes. And then having like this tax The key thing that people get out of Accountable is what they don't get in any other bookkeeping solution is, what's my net? What's the money on the bank account that is for me, that I can spend on holidays, on stuff for the kids, whatever it is? And what do I have to set aside? And we can now separate this physically and say, here, there's a tax account where you put this money aside, and then from there you can transfer it directly to the tax office, and you don't have to worry about this, that you ever be out of money. And that you can't really do that properly with open banking in a very smooth way. Now we can do this. And then on top of that, we built, okay, what else could there be? Then there are secondary motivations, like it's nice that we in marketing can now also be on the playing field for mental availability. Hey, I'm looking for a business bank account. Oh, there's a solution that has this already in there. I don't have to pay 20 euros for a bank account that really does nothing special for me, but I get an entire tax solution for that. That's a good value prop to put out there. And then obviously you mentioned the revenue. It always has to be a business case. If we add something, it ideally improves the product and the value for the user, and it doesn't make the business worse. It makes it better. That's also something we needed to put together. As I said, I think the industry developed a bit in that sense so that it was more viable to do it now than it was maybe years ago.
Interesting. You did mention already, I mean, if I put my own perspective on it, the way you describe it, with your core product before launching the embedded banking product, you obviously had a lot of touching points with fintech, but I don't know how you see it. You probably wouldn't really describe yourself as a hardcore fintech. Back then, probably with now the launch, you are a lot more in the fintech ecosystem. We just pre-chat about it now, attending a lot more fintech conference and these kind of things. So I'm quite curious, when you go back in time, maybe to, I don't know if you can define it like a time, but the point where you decided you want to build something, and obviously you said already you engaged with a couple of different providers. How was it for you to find the right solution? I mean, you did mention at the end of it, you built the product with Swan. How was the journey from deciding you want to build, you want to own it, until you actually decided and signed the contract? Was it a lot of researching and going around, especially I guess for somebody who doesn't know the space, maybe inside out, it can be quite overwhelming as well, right?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of players in there, all providing their services and obviously in their own right being credible contenders. And then you talk to all of those players, and what you try to assess is basically two things. It's the business case. What's the cost associated? Can we make this work on a business case view? And then what's the tech stack? Is this going to mess up our entire roadmap? Can we work back with the resources we have? Can we move fast? How flexible can we be on top of this? And to be honest, those banking as a service providers, their core thing is to have a solid banking infrastructure. They might not be as focused as we are on UX and UI and simplicity, because they cater to a variety of companies. And then if you serve corporations, larger SMBs or whatever, they maybe have more acceptance of some KYC flows than a prosumer we have who knows how smooth it can be with N26 or Revolut. So you have to up your game on this. So, and that was also a consideration to see which tech stack would probably work best for us. And then we put both together and see who you can work with. And in the end, we decided on Swan, and there's a lot of good things about it. There's some things where we work jointly to improve, to accelerate. But so far, it's been going good.
Interesting. And then now my question about that's you launched the banking product, and in a way what we all can hear is there is a lot of positive things with launching this this banking product. And if you described already the feature, the functionality at the end of it from a financial perspective at its core is a bank account and a debit card, which the freelancer can use to receive obviously spending from the clients, paid invoices, but also of course use it for external invoice or outgoing invoices, use the card and so on. So at the core, it's an account and a card. Now that you have made these positive learnings and stuff, do you also see potentially going into other directions of embedded finance? What the first thing that comes to my mind is what about insurances? Is that also something you yourself see in a good position to offer insurances or investment products with the cash that's maybe lying around to make something better with that? Has your thinking around these products changed since launching the banking product because you get more comfortable and confident that you can do this?
Yeah, I think if you think about taxes, it's all about finances in the end. And really, it's about the net, the money you can use. And then there are a couple of products that really also affect the net that you have and the taxes you pay. And you named it. Insurances can be one of them. Also, pensions is something connected to that can affect your taxes. And I think that's always been for sure on our pitch deck for investors and in the back of our head that we want to have a solution that solves a lot of those finance questions for the solopreneur, for the self-employed in Europe. Sometimes I said jokingly, like it's the CFO for people who don't necessarily know what a CFO is, because they run their day-to-day business that is maybe not connected to the business world, but just like really their own thing, their self-employment. And I think it's quite interesting to look into this. We have to always be sure that we don't mess up our value proposition and that it stays clearly focused on the needs of the user. But when we see an opportunity to solve some issues and also decomplexify, make it easier. And I think insurance and pensions are a big cost driver, and it's not easy and not easy to understand what to do there. So I think there is an opportunity, but yeah, first we need to nail one thing. I think banking, there's still a lot for us to do, and then we can move on to maybe other things that can help our users.
Makes sense. And in a way, like, I mean, obviously I'm also in the freelancer situation, and obviously also, to be transparent, a very happy, accountable user. So I know the product inside out. In a way, you can argue like what you like now also touching on the pension and insurance thing, you can maybe argue a little bit like most people are used from the being an employee. You can also now have a freelancer, right? Like I, as an employee, receive X thousand euros in my bank account, and my employer has already like taken the taxes and the insurance away, and kind of the money that hits my bank account, I can freely spend. Maybe I should still say something, but still, this is still my money. Whereas when I'm a freelancer, I send out an invoice for 10,000 euros. First, I have to see, okay, what about VAT? I have to put that aside. Then I have to pay income taxes at one point. I mean, sometimes it's much later. So the problem also compounds. Yeah. And the next one is like insurances and pension and stuff like that. And the way
exactly.
This can be like an employee experience for a freelancer, sort of like the peace of mind more or less than anything else.
I love what you say. It's really like, that's really the thing. And that's also the mission. I sometimes put it like this. We want to make being a self-employed as easy as being an employee. And then you also need to ideally give people also, and then we do this in our tax tips, but we could do even more to tell people, hey, and this type of like pension would save you so many taxes and your net would be impacted like this. And that's really hard for people to calculate outside of their day-to-day business, because it gets very technical. And for a lot of people, I think people want to do something, but then they so overwhelmed by the choices, pros and cons, so they end up doing nothing. And I think this indecision dilemma is the biggest one. So if you give people like a clear-cut, plain English or German choice and tell them what's the impact, I think they would be much more confident to take decisions that will eventually help them going forward in their lives. So I think it's a great mission, and I'm still excited by moving forward on this. Yeah.
That's a good point to kind of leave the embedded finance discussion and come to the other big news that you mentioned already at the very beginning. Obviously, you mentioned or described Accountable's journey and that you have reached already like a pretty good size. And now a couple of weeks ago, you announced the acquisition by Visma, a Norwegian company. I think that people who are in the space kind of know often acquires companies in the, let's say, business admin space. So quite curious to learn a bit more about that. Maybe I'm not sure if there's an embedded finance angle, but even outside of the embedded finance angle, quite keen to understand like what does it now, the acquisition, mean for Accountable, for the product and the potentially future developments.
Yeah, sure. So we announced it as an investment from Visma. So we also get like primary money into the company to make it grow. But yes, obviously like the joint plan is that Accountable joins the Visma family, being part of the group. And we already see like first synergies. Visma is also sponsoring, for example, the Tour de France. That's also nice in our marketing efforts. We can do something with that, especially in Belgium. Cycling is a big thing. So we're quite excited by this partnership. They clearly have developed, I would say, benchmarks and idea what good looks like in a, say, finance, EAP, payroll, tax type environment. And it's also like a recognition of what we've built to become part of that great group of companies. I think it gives us a clear road forward to keep building, keep investing, growing the company. And I think it's really a case where it's a win for all parties. Very nice outcome for our investors, which makes us proud. It's a good outcome for the entire team, and also for my co-founders and me. It's an incredible success where we feel we've done a good job at this.
Yeah. But then that means like you as a team, as Accountable, will stay independent, and the things you have mentioned before will, I mean, obviously there will be the benefit of being in the Visma or like being affiliated with Visma, a lot of like insights and benefits, but at the end of it, you will continue on your own, with your own brand and your own addressing customer needs journey.
Yeah, also the philosophy you see in Visma, that they acquire companies and then let them do their thing to support them where it's helpful, but also let them chart their own course. And as I said, I'm super excited for what's to come. So the entire rest of the team and my co-founders. So we still have like a lot of stuff to build. Now I have a new board member from Visma, which is great. So we can also build on how they see the world, because they obviously got much deeper insights into our industry than probably like a VC who has a more varied portfolio you can have. And so I think getting the best of both worlds from the board, from the investor view, and being able to keep accelerating, keep building. And yeah, that's going to be our job going forward in Germany and in Belgium.
Got it. I'm not sure if you have an answer for that, but I have to ask this question. Like, obviously now, like connecting like the embedded finance and the Visma piece, like in a way, can you say like in the Visma organization is like embedded finance, the offering financial product? I don't think you're the first one. I think there are quite a few who are offering already like financial products one way or another, but did this have any kind of relevance for the acquisition, or also maybe now that like after the transaction happened, did you see any kind of additional relevance for your banking offering?
Well, it's part of our business, and we were very strong that we feel this is a positive addition. So we discussed this and we keep discussing it. And actually, there's some very productive knowledge sharing between this group of companies. So it's also interesting for us to see what do other companies do and getting some insights on benchmarks, on what works, what doesn't work. So I feel this will be an ongoing discussion. And we look at it saying, hey, how can we integrate banking with the value add for users? Others are doing the same. And I think this only leads to good discussions. And I think we're going to see more of it, to be honest. So we've only just started on this journey, but I think we probably can, like in a year, probably have like a lot more insights on what other guys are doing. And yeah, it's going to inform our choices for sure.
Yeah. And I guess that especially like for, I mean, I guess I feel like many businesses in Europe, right? I mean, you operate already in 2 countries, might be going for other countries. Obviously, in the Visma portfolio, you have maybe not so many like direct competitors, but companies who target SMEs and like different verticals and different geographies. But also, of course, like a lot of like learning, especially when the learning is about like financial services, open banking, embedded banking, what providers are out there, what can they offer, how do they differ? You have companies who maybe started with one approach and switch for the others. I guess there is a lot of like fast tracks you can take while understanding these learnings.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, a lot of stuff you have to like try and learn yourself. But if you can build on the learning of others, that's the greatest shortcut you can ever get. So I'm excited to keep exchanging experiences there with all the others working in our field.
Amazing. Tino, thank you so much for sharing about Accountable, especially the banking product and now the new journey with Visma. If there's any listener out there who wants to chat a little bit more with you or learn more, what's the best way to get in touch with you or your team?
Yeah, just hit me a line on LinkedIn. Always happy to engage. And thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to discuss with you. And yeah, hope to see you quite soon, next event or podcast, whatever it is.
The next fintech event will come out soon. And yeah, maybe you said it, maybe we record another podcast episode in a year or 2, and then you can tell a little bit more about what has happened since the last one. So yeah, until then, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lars. Take care.
Thank you for listening. For more content, please visit embeddedfinancereview.com. And please reach out if you have an interesting embedded finance story to tell. Until next time.